Welcome to Sacred Stories, a sacred space where the divine voices of today are shared. I am your host, Reverend Patricia Caginello, and I'm very happy that you are joining us. And I invite you to join us for all of our podcast shows, courses, everything happening at Sacred Stories Media by going to sacredstoriesmedia.com. And you can also find this podcast and many other awesome podcasts on iTunes. Just look up Sacred Stories. Today, we're going to be speaking about the link between love and healing, which is forgiveness. And we're going to be talking with Rev Misty Tyme, author, forgiveness expert, interfaith minister, and author, as we said, of her new book, The Forgiveness Solution, a step-by-step process to let it go. So I'm very excited to start this conversation, and I want to say welcome, Rev Misty, to Sacred Stories.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here, and my heart is full. I'm very excited.
Well, I have full disclosure. The Forgiveness Solution, a step-by-step process to let it go, is being released today by Sacred Stories Publishing. So I'm excited. I am proud. As a fellow interfaith minister, Rev Misty and I went to the same seminary. We graduated different years, but the same seminary, One Spirit Interfaith. My heart is full to be able to be part of the process to bring your work to the world.
And it has been a process. I think everybody kind of thinks that people who write a book, it magically shows up. It doesn't. It's a process, and there's such amazing support. And I'm thrilled that it is coming to Sacred Stories, and like you said, proud and excited, all of it.
Well, it is a process, and it is a commitment, and it is a dedication, but you've been called to this work. Your life really has been the ongoing process of bringing your understanding and of the importance of forgiveness, and not only it's important to forgive, but how to forgive. Your process has been going on a long time.
Well, like most things in life, it's somewhat of a surprise when you realize that nothing is by accident, and forgiveness isn't something I had planned on working on. I had planned on working after seminary in death and dying, and I didn't really realize I was holding on to so much unforgiveness, those ugly, scary, sad, mad feelings, but I was. And after seminary, my brother passed away, and he wasn't just my brother, he was my twin brother. And to put it bluntly, he was a bit of a jerk. So not only was I stuck in grief, which I was very familiar with in my life, but I had not really understood the power of forgiveness. And I wanted to get rid of those ugly feelings that I just mentioned, but I didn't know how. So I went back to sacred scripture and really wonderful, deep books about forgiveness. And guess what I discovered, Patricia? I discovered that everybody tells you forgiveness is a good idea, both society and religion, but they leave out the how. And I'm one of those action girls. I like to know what I'm doing. I like to go get it. And so I wrote the how and put it into an algorithm. And that is what the book is based off of. It's also based off for real-life forgiveness stories.
It really is a phenomenal algorithm or process. Algorithm is the process we go through, right?
Yeah.
Before we dig into a little bit more about the book and the algorithm and so forth, you gave us just a little, this is Sacred Stories, and you gave us just this little kind of hint of one of your important sacred stories in your life, and that is the relationship with your brother and as the impetus to really dig into forgiveness. But can you share more of your sacred story surrounding your forgiveness journey with us?
I can. It's usually events in our life that make us take a second look. If life was going along just perfectly, right, we wouldn't be having to dig deep or wonder what was going on. And I was deeply sad when I found out, and it was just simply a phone call, and my brother had passed away, and his wife was calling me. The ambulance hadn't even gotten there yet. And I was feeling pretty good about myself after graduating and being ordained, and I thought I was kind of getting this thing, and I have a wonderful relationship with who I call God. And I thought I was, I was feeling pretty puffed up, actually. Then I got knocked back, knocked down, knocked sideways by grief. The problem was my twin brother and I, we weren't what most people think of as twins. We were not close. We did not chat. We didn't even call each other on our birthday. And we had long history of our childhood, and isn't that what we all kind of come back to, huh, Patricia? Lots of times it goes back to our childhood. We had a really rough one. Not as rough as some, but rougher than most. And he didn't deal with it well. He didn't rise above. And I was very angry about that. He wasn't the brother I expected him to be. And at that moment, I was filled with grief. I was filled with anger. I was also filled with, I didn't get to make sure he knew how right I was and how wrong he was. I needed him to admit that. And that's what really started me on my journey. And that journey, that sacred journey was, and I kind of think of it now, I'm sure God was smiling, and even though I was very sad and in grief, was like, this is what you're here for. You need to discover forgiveness. So then I decided to have a conversation with other people about it. I really wanted to forgive my brother. I really wanted to have some compassion for him, even though he had done some very not nice things. Ultimately, I didn't know how. And that's where I decided I needed a process. I come from a medical background. Everything's a process. I come from a business background. It's a process. You do this, this, and this. And I wanted to get to the bottom. I wanted to find out how. And that's where I was sitting on an airplane next to my little son, and I literally pulled out the napkin. And like before the pretzels, after fasten your seatbelt, I wrote on this napkin the forgiveness algorithm, which is the step-by-step process. Now, of course, it's expanded and it's much more, defined, but it was a God moment for me. It was like, here you go. Here's what you were looking for. And that's how my sacred story grew. It grew from that point.
What I think is what resonates the most about the forgiveness solution and you very specifically, Rev Misty, bringing it to the world, is your ability to be really honest, really open, really honest. You don't sugarcoat. You let people know I didn't have the greatest relationship with my twin brother, and in your book you go into a lot of reasons why. You really dig in and you talk about it. But you do that in service to others. You do that in opening up yourself, and that is what I think is a true sacred story. You open yourself up so others can see their selves or their circumstances or have a resonance with the experience in service to others.
Well, why do we want to be reverenced? It's not just because we want a closer relationship with whoever you use the word for, God, but it's most of the people I met, pretty much everybody I've ever met who wanted to go to seminary did it because they wanted to be of service. Now, lots of times as humans, we go in with our own idea of what that service is going to look like. This is what we want to do. And this is where I took a side turn. Like, this is where God said, no, this is where you need to be. Because I used to be embarrassed about my story. I did everything in my life to avoid talking about my story, my twin brother. Most of my adult friends had no idea I even had a twin brother. And if you did, you heard not very nice things from me. You heard how terrible he was, how his life is terrible, how mean and terrible he was. And it wasn't the real story, actually. It wasn't the whole story because, yes, that was a piece of it, but that was coming from my own pain and sadness and unforgiveness. And with forgiveness and with understanding what letting it go really means, I uncovered so many myths and misconceptions that I held within myself. I found out I wasn't alone. Many people hold those same myths and misconceptions. And sure enough, I did a small talk in my home with neighbors, with a whole bunch of wonderful women. And out of that talk on forgiveness, a very small talk on forgiveness, it was like a light bulb moment, a sacred moment, another one, which was, guess what? everybody has this issue. So now I like to say, if you're over the age of 12, you probably have a forgiveness issue, whether it be with a neighbor, boss, family member, ex-husband, ex-wife, ex-anybody, friends. You have expectations that they didn't live up to, which causes us those sad and ugly feelings. And that's really where this blossomed from, where I was like, oh my gosh, I can help here. I really, really can help here. And that goes back to what you said. This is the service that we really want to provide. So out of my pain, and yes, I like to be honest. I really do. I also like to find the humor in life because it opens your heart where sadness can slam it shut. And I can find the humor in the situation, even through deep sadness, and find the little lights that God tucked in different places. And that's where I want to help other people find that same freedom that forgiveness has given me, has let compassion sneak in and empathy sneak in, and has made me a happier person. And I was pretty happy-go-lucky, at least I thought I was. And that's what forgiveness does, and that's the service that I now find myself in. And I'm thrilled to be there because there's nothing better than finding someone, no matter what it is, finding someone who's been there and done that. Isn't that right, Patricia? Finding somebody who's been there and done that, you want to glean from them because you want to save yourself some time. Well, this isn't a cookbook. This is a forgiveness book. So I'm going to save you some time on forgiveness. And because I want to clear up some of your really deep-held myths and misconceptions of what forgiveness is.
Well, that's the shared experience, right? That's the power, the resonance of the shared experience is exactly what you're speaking to. So let's talk about a couple of the myths or misconceptions. I mean, I heard you speak of one already, and when you said that you wanted to hear him tell you that you were right, right? So let's speak about that. Let's talk about a couple of the common ones that people can relate to.
Okay. The most common ones is, yes, you feel that you're right, and you probably are. You're probably so right, and you're waiting for the other person to admit that they are wrong and somehow also change their behavior. If they change their behavior or their outlook, then that means you're right, they're wrong, and, it's a control situation. So forgiveness is not about control. And forgiveness is also, and this was really big for me because it kind of goes back to the I'm right part. Forgiveness does not mean that you condone behavior. And that was really hard for me because if I said that I forgive you, that I was going to, quote, let that go and let you just go on your merry way and be happy, then that means that I was okay with what happened. And I talk about what happened a little bit in the book. And, of course, there's many more stories about that in my real life and in my talks. But the fact is, what happened in his childhood, my childhood, what he did from that pain was not okay. I could still forgive him, and that could still not be okay. And I think that's one of the big ones. And then also forgiving is forgetting. I can't forget. I can't forget that, he held a gun to my head in my life. And I can't forget that our childhood was really tumultuous. But I could decide, and that's the big thing about forgiveness, is decision, to change my perception. And it's not an easy thing to do. It's not like you just go, wow, I'm going to change my perception right now. It doesn't work that way. It's a decision, but you have to kind of look at all the aspects. I'm going to change my perception so that I can have freedom in my heart, mind, and soul, so that I can let go of those heavy feelings that sit on our chest and in our gut. And so that's a few of the misconceptions I love to talk about, which is you don't have to be right to forgive, and you don't have to be wrong to forgive. You can be both right and wrong and still forgive. You can also not condone bad behavior or what happened to you and say that it was okay, because it wasn't okay. It's very sad and it's unfortunate. But with forgiveness, you can change your perception. So those are just some of my favorite little myths and misconceptions. And also, I don't expect you to forget that something bad happened to you, but you can gain some space from it with forgiveness.
I think that's probably one of the very biggest ones, is that we feel that if we forgive the other person, we're somehow letting them know that what they did was okay. And you're saying forgiveness has nothing to do with you letting them know it's okay or not okay. That's not even the point of true forgiveness.
Correct. You know, it's been said that forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. And I really didn't understand that little statement until afterwards, until after I had really come to that forgiveness place where I'd, quote, let it go. And what it means is that I do not condone bad behavior. Who could condone murder? Who could condone alcoholism? Who can condone all those things? People aren't going to say that that's okay. And I'm also not going to forget that happened. But forgiveness is really about you. You actually don't ever have to tell the other person. That's kind of another myth, is that you need to go up to them and say, I've forgiven you. You don't need to do that, because it's happening in your mind, your heart, and your soul, which is a decision to accept them for who they were, let them go on their path, understand that it doesn't mean what they did was correct, but it also says that I'm no longer going to try to control this to a place of I want you to change. Like, have we ever, Patricia, have you ever met somebody you just want to sit them down, you want to shake their shoulders, and you want to say, wake up, be better? And when we realize that that's not going to happen, it's a little bit of a relief. It's like, oh, good, because I'm worn out. I'm worn out of trying to change you. And that's exactly what I wanted him to change. I wanted him to be a different person so that I could be happier. It's pretty selfish if you think about it. Because I wanted a relationship with him, but I couldn't with the relationship of how he managed himself in the world. But letting him go and be on his path set me up to stop looking at him with anger and hate, but more with empathy and compassion. And that's also what forgiveness does for you.
And feeling compassion or empathy for another also doesn't mean that they're right and you're wrong, or you condone their behavior.
Yeah.
And I think that's another stumbling block that people have. They're like, well, if I'm not mad at them any longer, but if I really just let go of that anger, then somehow they've won, or somehow,
right.
that this is saying
Perfect.
It's okay.
Right.
Right.
And
right.
that is absolutely perfect. So, and they won is a perfect statement. Very common, I think, in our society today. It's you're either a winner or you're a loser, and you need to be the winner. Well, unfortunately, when we're trying to control other people's behavior, we're going to. So it's a win. It's not necessarily a win or a lose. It is a letting go of the idea that you have to win. And that's kind of also hard too, because just because you're not going to win does not mean that they win. It's a neutral ground. It also lets you decide what your boundaries are going to be with that person. Because if you're no longer trying to change them and prove to them how wrong they are, then you can also make healthier boundaries. Just because if my brother was living and I went through the forgiveness process, did I think that then he was coming over for Sunday dinner? No. But I can stop looking at trying to change his behavior to make me happier. And that means having him tell me he was wrong and I was right, proving to him over and over again how wrong he was. We have social justice for criminals. We do. We hopefully most of the time. And then we have societal consequences. And that's where your boundaries come in. Just because his behavior the way it was, I can't change his behavior, but he can still have consequences for his behavior. That means we're not going to be getting together as a big happy family until he on his own chose to do his own thing and be a healthier person. That is what it is. Also, forgiveness is an amazing tool in your life, because if you're not holding those tense, angry feelings where you just want to get in their face and say, don't you see what you did, and you need to fix this. When you let go of the fact that they need to fix it, because they're on their own unique path, and it might not be a pretty one. It might be a bumpy, rocky one. And so you can put the boundary in and say, okay, you go on your path. I'm going to go on mine. I'm going to, in our business, Patricia, we send love and light a lot. I'm going to send different vibes. It's not going to be such anger and hate, because all it's doing is setting your own soul up for that pain over and over again. They might not even know how much pain you're in. So ultimately, the point of forgiveness is that it lets you decide to let go of the pain, get healthy boundaries. Does not mean condoning behavior, and it lets you make better choices. It doesn't put you in a bad place over and over again, because really forgiveness is about you.
One of the reasons that I was so excited when you brought the Forgiveness Solution, your manuscript to Sacred Stories, and why we wanted to publish it was because of the process, the how-to, right? Because everything we're talking about isn't new, right? It's people say it all the time, but what they're saying is, they're forgetting the how. But in the Forgiveness Solution, it truly is a step-by-step process to let it go. So you're led through, and you do the process. There's step 1, step 2, it goes on. One of those is the part about creating boundaries, right? It's really important that we understand the concept of boundaries. And I feel that is unfamiliar to many people, especially when you're in intimate relationships. The understanding and the importance not only of having boundaries, but that boundaries are okay. They actually serve a really important purpose for you and for the other person. It's not a wall. It's not where you're closing yourself off. It's where you're honoring yourself and the other person by really understanding what are appropriate boundaries and behaviors in relationships.
Well, in my book, I talk about this too. I talk about boundaries kind of getting a bad rap. We kind of feel sometimes that people walk up and go, I have a boundary, and that's kind of rude. But that's not at all what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is healthy guidelines in your life. And I think about it as a fence. So if you have a fence, and we've all gone through gates, correct? And sometimes there's a gatekeeper. Well, you are the gatekeeper of your life. So you get to decide how often someone comes through your gate, what's coming through your gate, and you have the power. And that's the piece about forgiveness and boundaries, and this whole process is that you have the power from the beginning to the end. And it's kind of like Dorothy at the Wizard of Oz, right? She had the power to go home the whole time, but she had to keep running into everything from witches and monkeys and scarecrows and all that kind of thing. And at the end, they said, guess what, Dorothy, you had the power the whole time. Well, you have the power of how you want your life to look. You can design it. And those healthy boundaries or guidelines or fences are all for you. And you can still be kind. It's not like you're being rude. You're being kind. And if someone isn't healthy in your life, whether it's an intimate relationship, whether it's a sibling or a parent or even a dear friend, if they're not healthy, you can decide how much you want them to come through your gate. A little bit, like when you're ready and you can handle that, or you've had counseling and you're prepared for it, or not at all. And you can talk to them from across the gate in a kindly manner. And that's important, that we stay true to ourselves, to our heart. And when we've all felt anger. Anger is not normal. It is totally normal. But when you come back to that place and you're like, oh, that wasn't fun. That didn't feel good. So boundaries let you stay a little bit longer in the feel-good place, even when you're angry. You can still choose to be kind with your boundaries, and that you can set time limits. You can do all those things within there, and it's okay. That's what's really important. It's kind of a misconception in our society that boundaries are all this, TV show type of talk, but it's really, really helpful. Now, it could be I visit my mother 3 times a week, or I'm there for 8 hours. What's healthy for you? What do you need to be your best self? And that's where boundaries really come in. And that's where forgiveness helps you get to those boundaries. And that's what's so beautiful about forgiveness and letting it go.
What's really also beautiful about the book that you've written, The Forgiveness Solution, a step-by-step process to let it go, is not only do you give us the how to forgive, right? And the myths, the misconceptions, so we can let go of them and we could see like, whoa, like other people feel that too, right? That's okay that I let that go. But you also talk about different types of forgiveness, different things that you can be mad at. They're not all intimate relationships, right? So, for example, in your book, what I love to read was one of them was a woman in her situation in her workplace, right? Another one is a situational forgiveness when, if someone gets sick, right? So speak a little bit about taking forgiveness, really reaching, because your book has it all, right? So it's not just, well, I'm not in a really mad at my family member or an intimate relationship. We can have unforgiveness and get stuck in other types of situations.
Absolutely. I call it like situational forgiveness. It's very hard to have compassion for cancer, right? It's very hard to have compassion for death, for those losses, for the difficult times, for that job loss or that bankruptcy or those different things. So how do you forgive a bad situation? Well, it's situational forgiveness, and I do talk about that in my book, and I talk about that in my own life, is that you have to step back and, that whole adage is bad things happen to good people. Well, also good things happen to bad people, which is even more frustrating. But you need to understand that forgiveness is a tool, it's a lesson tool for you. So if you can look at these situations and forgive that they happen to you because it's part of our human being experience. We don't go through life happy-go-lucky and everything, butterflies and rainbows. Stuff happens to us, and sometimes it's 100% out of our control, whether it be a car accident and then, that had to do with slippery roads. It has nobody's out to get you type of situation. Or it's hard to put perspective on that sometimes. And I talk about that in not just my situation, but other people's situation. You brought up the work situation, right? You brought up that. So we can work on forgiving the people, but how do we forgive the situation of now I'm unemployed and I feel terrible and I feel down about myself? Well, the one lesson that you can take from forgiving situations is all the things you learned during the situation. And kind of back like Dorothy, and trying not to repeat a bad situation. So if it's a work situation, maybe pick your next job more consciously. Make sure you're in a good, happy place and the people around you will be good, or it's a job that you will now love. With cancer, it's very hard. How do you forgive cancer? That you can't, but you can forgive the situation. You can forgive your body for not working correctly. You can forgive somebody else for their body not working correctly. It's just genetics. It's quote, the bad luck of it all. But you can take the lessons from it. And that's another piece about forgiveness. And I'm almost jumping up and down because I'm so excited about this piece, is the lessons you get. That's the piece that's probably the most important about forgiveness. You learn from the experience, but that is also your choice. You have to learn from it, so you either don't repeat it, or you see it coming your way, or you walk into a situation. How can I walk into this situation different than I did before, whether it be an illness, that kind of stuff. It's all so multifaceted. I just get so excited. And I never knew I would about forgiveness, by the way. I never knew that word didn't really come into my brain very often. And now that's all it does is come into my brain.
Well, Rev Misty Tyme, you've written a really, truly a phenomenal body of work and a very relatable body of work. And as you said, with honesty and humor and really, really explaining all the different types of forgiveness there are. We talked about forgiving others, situational forgiveness, even you go into self-forgiveness also in the book. And you have a forgiveness quiz in the book to see what kind of forgiver you are or are not, right? Which is kind of a little twist, right? Because you might not be a forgiver.
we don't even realize it, right? We don't even realize how we hold our forgiveness beliefs. And I tried to make it a bit fun, but we all know that person who says, you hurt me, I'm done. I'm shutting the door on you. That's the last thing. I never trust you again. You're the one and I'm done type of forgiver. And that might be you. That wasn't me. I was a little bit of the stuffer, that kind of stuff. So take the quiz because it's really fun and it's kind of eye-opening.
It is. It's a phenomenal quiz. So you have the quiz, you have the process, and you have the whole process. So it's packed with forgiveness stories that I know will resonate with many. It's packed with. It's actually also filled also with how society handles forgiveness, how religions handle forgiveness, how cultures handle forgiveness. It is a very. It just goes on and on. It's just a wonderful, wonderful book. I encourage everyone to check out The Forgiveness Solution, A Step-by-Step Process to Let It Go by Rev Misty Tyme. And Misty, before I ask you to share how people can find you and connect with you, because you have so much going on, share though, after this whole process and having the book released, what is your hope when someone reads your book? When someone picks up your book and reads it, what is your hope for that person?
My hope is that forgiveness is framed for them in a real way, that the how is answered, that yes, they want to forgive, and many people say, oh, I'd love to forgive, I just can't get past the I want. This answers the I want, because I want you to know I was there too. I really wanted to let go of that pain and anger, but I really needed to know how to do that. And I want to put that into the book, the how. It's so important. It's very rare that you'll ever find someone who doesn't agree that letting things go and forgiveness is a good idea. But and how would you do that exactly? And this puts in the how, but it also makes it very personal. It's your journey. It's your personal forgiveness journey. It's your expedition through forgiveness. And it can be unique to you. And that's also what I wanted the book to be. I wanted it to be unique to the person. It's not just my story. It's not just other people's story. This is your story, and you get to work that out in this book.
And Rev Misty, how can people find you, contact you, work with you further in this amazing work?
I would love to hear. Thank you. I would love to hear from anybody and everybody, and I would love to hear your forgiveness stories and all that kind of thing. You can find me at revmisty.com. That's REVMISTY.com. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and it's Rev Misty. And I'm also on, all the social media. And Sacred Stories, I am so blessed and so happy to share my Forgiveness Solution podcast. And what we do on the podcast is we talk to a whole bunch of people about forgiveness, their own stories, different subjects, whether it be money, whether it be forgiving your ex, grief, a whole bunch of different things. And please find me at the Forgiveness Solution podcast right there at Sacred Stories.
Well, we're just thrilled that you're bringing the work and you're bringing it through Sacred Stories, because we believe in forgiveness. Of course, we believe in the work that you're doing. We believe in you. We believe in you. This is a beautiful, beautiful sharing that you are in service to others. Yeah. So we're happy to have you. So the Forgiveness Solution, a step-by-step process to let it go, is Rev Misty Tyme's new book. You can find it through Sacred Stories Publishing, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all major booksellers worldwide, print and ebook. So I encourage you to check it out. I do encourage you to check out the Forgiveness Solution podcast also on Sacred Stories Media. And again, all of our offerings that we have, podcasts, books, online courses. There's so much. Check it out, sacredstoriesmedia.com.